Let's move on to some paranoia news. Matt Walsh says that GMOs are turning people transgender to a certain extent. That's a fun little out there that he's given himself.
So here's the thing. The only paranoia in this article is that anybody, and there are people who give Matt Walsh any credence whatsoever. I mean, that's the only thing that we need to be paranoid about. This is something that's not new, and that's really what Matt Walsh is good at, is retreading old stuff that he makes it sound good and flashy and new, but that's not what is happening here. He was speaking at the University of California in Berkeley. Somebody asked, what biological and chemical changes are occurring in society through pharmaceuticals and food, like genetically modified food, contributing to how people see gender and what we currently see in society and what your film is about. Now, let's stop right here and let's consider, what is Matt Walsh's educational background to make him an expert on environmental impact on biology? Specifically, the minute transitions that happen sometimes at a genetic level in an environmental impact. I can tell you this, Matt Walsh is in no way qualified to answer that question. All he is qualified to do is create some really good sounding bullshit. And there is one thing that I know. I have a BA in BS, okay? I know, well, hell, I've got a master's in it, but I know what BS sounds like. And he says, I think it is contributing to a certain extent, but I couldn't speak with any authority on how that exactly works.
And yet the interesting thing is that because of the following that he's built up and the way that people see him, he starts off as an authority. People see him as an authority. And so the fact that he does these things with, he makes these wild speculations and furthers all of these falsehoods that have, many of which have been proven complete BS.
Yeah.
His audience doesn't care. They laud him up as an expert. He must have done his research. He must know what he's talking about. That's the basic premise of the start of any sentence that comes out of him. So to do that, he's cherry picking the best of both. He's saying, I'm going to go ahead and say these things, and my audience is going to believe me and just take my word for it. And then I'm going to give myself an out and saying, I don't know, I'm no expert on this. And it's just like, it's a very cheap and cowardly way of approaching all of this stuff.
Well, and his further comment, sort of blows this out so that you can see this in detail. He said, now, I'm not saying that in and of itself it explains why we have the proliferation of transgenderism, but it just goes to show that clearly there's something in the food, something in our diet and our environment that's affecting us at a really basic internal level. And that's something I think that's worth exploring for sure. Now, instead of paying for a study to look at the environmental impacts on the gender identity of an individual, he wants to go on and make his movie where he tries to define a word around the world with people who don't use the word the same way that he does as an American. But let's look at it, at this level. If there is something in the diet, if there's something in the environment, then what we should be seeing is not a decrease in numbers, which we have seen over the last few years. Census data shows that there has been a decrease in identified transgender people, but we should be seeing an exponential increase because those environmental impacts should be happening on a wider scale than 1.7% of the population. And if it is only impacting a small portion of the population, then that would mean that there is a genetic or biological predisposition to that environmental impact to lead to those changes. So all he is arguing is that there is a biological or a genetic imperative for transgender people. He's actually proving our point in that statement.
Yes, in a very roundabout and completely confusing for the audience sort of way. And the funny thing is, and this is the kind of crux of the issue, right? The Conservative Party believes that there is some big LGBT wave, that there's some big, huge pandemic of transgenderism. And the thing is that the reason you're hearing so much about it is because they themselves, those very same blowhards, are the ones that keep this on repeat, keep repeating these lies and the falsities and the false claims about what causes it, or how many people there are, or what's going on in the community, without, again, like you said, without citing any studies or actually looking into the real data that's out there.
Right.
And politicians have glommed onto this, and they see it as a way to get political favor. So they're making their whole political campaigns and legislative agendas focused around it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, why is there this huge wave of transgender, stuff coming at me at all times? It's like, it's because your own echo chamber is creating that. If you would just shut up about it and leave us alone, it would be June. You'd hear about us in June.
But here's the deal. And this is it. Further down in the article, we get the background of this. The article does come out and state Matt Walsh has never gone to college. He did not graduate college. But he has no expertise in gender issues, biology, medicine, or transgender identity. Republican student organizations from around the country on college campuses have invited him onto those campuses to talk about this. David Chan, who is president of the Berkeley College Republicans, said this: trans people's existence is a political question that must be discussed. It has nothing to do with hatred. It has nothing to do with marginalizing a community, but it has everything to do with raising up political questions I think everyone should discuss. Now, problem, if those political questions that are being raised automatically begin with the solution to this is the de-escalation of the population of this group of people, you have already given yourself away. You have already let the crowd know what's in the final chapter. All right. We've all read that the butler did it, and now you want to execute the butler in chapter 1. This is the essence. These students are buying into this Republican platform that transgender people are a political issue. United States citizens are a political issue. The existence of human beings is a political issue. They want to talk about those little embryos, and they want to talk about how much life potential is in that little bitty embryo, and yet a transgender person is just a political issue that needs to be discussed and talked about and brought up for questioning.
I don't know about you, but when you were reciting that, I got a bit of a chill down my spine, because saying that transgender people are a political issue sounded very, very similar to Nazi propaganda. That
Absolutely.
the Jewish problem. Yeah. We've drawn lots of similarities, especially when Marla was on the show. She would regularly draw that correlation, and it's just scary to see that.
And that's the thing now, Emily.
This level of fruition.
The issue is that there's not even just correlation between the language of the rhetoric of the right and what we saw as Nazi propaganda. We are actually seeing them cut and pasting from the playbook. We are seeing them use the language of that time, bringing it into this country and targeting a group of people in this country who are a minority of a minority. Even among the LGBTQ plus community, we are a minority. So when you have a minority within a minority, when you have that marginalized group within a marginalized group, you are saying, hey, look, if we can get everybody to turn against these people, we can solve all of our problems. That is exactly what the National Socialist Party said in the 1930s. If we can get everybody to turn against this group of people, if we can get everybody to jump on board with making sure that they do not have an impact in society, then our country can get great again.